And we're live. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another photo mishmash. This one being broadcast live April 11th, 2018. Back with Steve. Steve, we weren't sure if you're going to be able to join us. I'm so glad you're here. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, it's good to be back. Thank you. Nice to see you all.
This is that weekly show where Steve and I sit here and we chit-chat. We catch up with each other if we haven't just been on a tour together. Which is rare, but actually that has happened over the last couple of weeks. Steve, the last time I saw you in person was in Africa. And you've just finished up the Washington, D.C. tour. Tell us a little bit about that.
So D.C. was awesome. Last year was the first time I had done that trip with the McKays. And prior to that, the only other time I'd been to D.C. as a tourist was, other than just flying through, was 7th or 8th grade. So I missed the whole DC portion last year. I had some family in town. I ended up joining with the tour late and got the Harper's Ferry and Amish country experience, but didn't get to do much in DC except shoot the Capitol building on Sunset. So for me, it was just awesome. It was awesome as an instructor and just getting to take people to these places. And most of the clients had not spent any time in DC in the past, or it had been a long time and they never had done it as a photography tour. But I was also kind of a real tourist on this one too. I mean, there's just something really special about being in our nation's capital and photographing it. And I'll tell you, the thing that was the most powerful for me and literally brought me to tears as soon as I approached it, and it's one of my favorite exhibits there, and I remember that from 7th grade, is the Vietnam Memorial. The memorial itself is absolutely just beautiful, and I love the way it was done. I love the story about I think it was a young lady that designed it, and there was a lot of controversy when it was put up or dug or whatever. But having just been to Vietnam earlier this year and hearing a lot of the stories and then going to the memorial just a couple of months later was a bit overwhelming, to be honest with you. Yeah. But in a good way. I was just really grateful that I got to have that experience. And the trip was awesome. The clients were great. We had a wonderful time.
Yeah, nice. Roy is wondering, you know, the cherry blossoms is kind of the central goal when you land there in DC, and you seems like from your beautiful pictures you timed that right. Tell us a little bit about the crowds.
So the crowd, yeah, there were a lot of people there. But cherry blossoms literally peaked, I think, the day after we got there, or the last Friday, something like that. I mean, it literally peaked right as we were there. So, and last year we were either a little too early or a little too late. I don't remember. And again, I had missed that portion. They were still really cool, but this year, I mean, they were just incredible. The first morning, so they've changed some of the parking around the Jefferson Memorial, which the first morning, that's where we like to photograph the cherry blossoms, and you kind of frame the memorial under the blossoms. And they've changed the parking hours where you can't park on that main road before 6 a.m. Okay. So we got up and we got going at 4 o'clock in the morning that first day to really beat the crowds there. And we pull up, no, it was 4:30. We pull up, it's about 5 o'clock. And there was nobody around. So we parked the cars and we just kind of let people go and get set up and find a prime spot. And then just to be safe, David and I took turns kind of hanging with the cars to make sure that, you know, no police officers were coming by and enforcing that law, which they really weren't. But just before 6 o'clock, we just fed the meters. They've since started metering those streets and changed the hours and stuff, but it's on a Park Mobile app. So it's really simple. Oh, cool. And yeah, and we got there and the crowds were not that bad because we were there early enough. Yeah. We didn't need to be there as early as we thought. But the year before, the crowds were horrendous, I was told. And they got there, you know, about the same time and could barely find a spot to put your tripod down. Yeah. So I think we timed it okay. If anything, we were a little too early this time, but that had a lot to do with what they're doing with the streets. And there's always construction going on, and two-way streets that are being fed as one-way streets. And it's honestly, it's a nightmare to drive around. Although it has nothing on Boston or LA.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Guys, good. My memory last year is that early in the morning, the crowds really weren't too bad. Sure, there were more people out early than you would normally see, but you could find a spot, you could get set up. But man, right after that sun came up, as that morning progressed, it would get very, very busy. And last year it was during the weekend of the Cherry Blossom Festival.
Oh, that's what it was. Yeah.
So that brought additional people, and midday driving down the main streets, like in the mall, it was just mobbed with people left and right and tricky.
Yeah.
But like the national parks and like everywhere that's busy during the middle of the day, the early morning and the late afternoon / evenings, it usually gets much, much quieter.
At night, it was great. As soon as 5 o'clock hits, everybody starts leaving. So if you go down there, if you leave at 6 from the hotel where we stayed, it takes about, 15, 20 minutes to get down there. And you can just find parking right in front of whatever monument you want as people are clearing out. And then you just kind of hang out there and shoot sunset. So that was great. We would go out early morning and then we'd go back out at sunset, and we generally have some free time during the day. But we did a nice job of filling that free time in. We went over to one of the Air and Space museums where the space shuttle is. I think it was Discovery. And that was just incredible just to go in there as a tourist. Of course, we all brought our cameras, and we talked a lot about leading lines and how to shoot indoors with ISO and stuff. But then just let people kind of cut loose and just be tourists. And that's a very, very important part of the tours that we do. Is they are photography based, but we also encourage people to look away from their camera and take it in.
Yeah, nice. And Trelina is wondering, Max Sense and Adrian, who are just longtime followers and friends, they were seemingly very close to you all at times based on their pictures. And then my friend Drew, who I met through Sony, he's the guy who shot the opening sequence to House of Cards. He was there one morning too. And I almost like messaged him and be like, be on the lookout for, but then I was like, there's going to be a million people there. How do you,
well,
it's not worth trying.
As a fanboy, I really wish that you would have messaged him, because I'm honest, I would have loved to have met Drew, and I probably would have asked him for his autograph, because that opening scene of House of Cards, my wife and I both watch House of Cards. We're big fans of that show. That's one of the coolest time-lapse opening scenes. It's one of those shows that I never fast forward through the opening scene.
Yeah,
even episodes of Game of Thrones, even though it kind of tells you what to expect secretly in the episode, I still fast forward through a lot of that. But I never do with House of Cards. I could watch that over and over again.
Yeah, it's really down to earth. It's cool. Yeah. Okay. Sounds good, Steve. Sounds like a great trip. We'll be looking for more of your pictures. If you don't follow Steve on Instagram or his Facebook, you can find him linked, I don't know, in the Penn group. Probably just find one of his pictures that he's posted and follow through that. You should follow him. You're always creating fantastic imagery.
Yeah, I tend to use, I have my greatest following in my personal Facebook page, which is Steve Sturridge. And those regulars in this chat, I've actually become friends with some of you, and it's really cool to get to watch your stuff, and I get to show you what I do. But I'm trying to post more in Steve Sturridge Photography, so certainly go there and like that page. And I'm also trying to use Instagram a lot more. A little behind the ball this week, but I talked before about later.com, and you've done a couple reviews on that, and that's slowly making its way into my kind of normal routine of scheduling posts.
Yeah, good. With the auto post scheduling now, it's pretty nice. It's pretty nice. I'm going to have another video that comes out that shares a little bit more about that. Yeah. All right. We were chit-chatting, but we were walking through the weekend review section, really. I had a Tuesday tip that went out this week for all Penn members. The F Stops Here was the clever title of it. There used to be a podcast by a friend of mine called The F Stops Here, I think. And it's just kind of a step back look at aperture, just some simple explanations of what aperture is, what f-stop is, how it affects your images, both in the light gathering and the depth of field, and especially looking at depth of field, because what I find from a lot of beginners is they think they need to step up to the scene with a wide angle lens for a landscape photo and be like f16. And then you just don't. And I have some examples that show you and talk about sometimes when you do need to be at F16. So go take a time to read that. If you can't find it in your email, let us know. But everybody should have gotten it. But it's also in the Penn member section down there under Tuesday Tips 2018. Just nice little click. And it's a nice little article with some images too.
Yeah, one of the things I loved about that Tuesday tip is you took a nice deep dive in there, but it's in language that everybody can understand. And I do find, especially as we do more of these tours, that the more you can kind of give the backstory on what things are. So we've got this term f-stop and aperture. They're used interchangeably. And all this stuff comes from the film days, 35 millimeter film days. And it's just kind of made its way into the digital world. So these are camera terms that have been around for a long, long time. And but when you understand kind of how it works, yeah, it's technical, but it also becomes so much easier to understand how to change your camera settings to get what you want, if that makes any sense. Yeah. To just pull up to a scene and remember a bunch of numbers, like, okay, my ISO should probably be increased a little bit because it's getting dark. And what did David say? What did Toby say about this setting? But if you truly understand what f-stop is and what it controls, then you have an easier time understanding the language of photography. And I know we've talked about that in the past. So yeah, awesome job on that.
Thank you. It's so easy to get it confused because even as I was writing it out and using terms like smaller, narrower, wider, larger, they get mixed up. And so when people are looking at these numbers and the fact that they're actually a fraction and smaller numbers are the numbers that look larger when they're written out, as they usually are with f-stop, it just confuses people. So Jamie and Trelina Jamie's actually mentioning that she was at a photo show this weekend, or actually you were at a craft fair selling your work, I think, Jamie, and some woman started talking to you, and it turned out to be Angela, who of course is a long time ago.
No way.
And so they had a nice little chat. They realized that they both knew me and Penn and all of this together. So that's cool.
Is that Angela Redmond?
That is, yes. Yep,
yeah,
Redmond.
I keep seeing her name in her posts and stuff. So yeah, small world. That's great.
That is cool. Yeah. And one last wrap up, and this was kind of a little late to the party, but when I was at WPPI last month, I also stopped by the Panasonic booth and took a quick look at their GX9, which is their latest, we'll call it their latest entry-level mirrorless, or they're all mirrorless, their latest entry-level Micro Four Thirds. Really nice. And it's interesting. I handled that right after I handled the Canon M50. And so here are these two cameras that are quite similar in cost and price. But of course, the Panasonic does full 4K with all of its autofocus modes still, not like the M50. And you got dual image stabilization, optical, both sensor and lens working together to create really smooth footage when you're hand holding. That's something that GH5 does that I love. So it's just interesting to compare that. Now, that GX9 is a couple $100 more. And it is a slightly smaller sensor, and it doesn't have the fully articulating screen that Canon offers. So there's definitely some downsides to it. But, Panasonic's been making some really nice cameras for the last couple of years. I also I held the Panasonic G9. I hope to bring you all a full review of that camera soon. Barbara's asking, it looks like she commented somewhere that Roy picked up. She was hoping to hear some of my experiences on the Panasonic G9, be interested in my thoughts, especially concerning the image quality of the Micro Four Thirds sensor. And this is what I could say now, Barbara, without having spent a lot of time shooting with that camera, I am really happy with the image quality of the GH5. And that is a more video focused and then secondary is stills camera. The G9 is more of a stills camera and then secondary video camera. I think it's a fantastic camera. And in that little video, I talk a little bit about the real strength of the Micro Four Thirds system is it stays small even when you get longer lenses. And so I will hope to bring a full review of the G9 at some point soon. Like that.
On our trip to Tanzania, it was day 2 or 3, and I was working with Chuck Sarah on our Land Rover as we were out, and he's got an older Nikon that he thought he was primarily going to be using for stills, and then his GH5 he was going to use to capture some video. And we started working on getting some really sharp shots with his GH5 with that Micro Four Thirds sensor and a long lens. And once we got the focus all nailed down, he was getting great shots. That Nikon never came out of the bag. He just used that the whole time we were there, and he was getting some awesome shots. So it was a good do-it-all camera for him on that Tanzania trip. I was pretty impressed with it.
Yeah. It's a really nice camera. I enjoy using it very much. Okay. Now, if you haven't watched the show in a little while, we switched it up at some point, maybe after a year of doing this, I'll stop saying that. But we dive into the critiques now because we feel that's an important part of the show. And we've got just a couple of images. And I also should say 2 programming notes. One, we are going to keep this show as close to 1 hour, or maybe even a little bit less if I can not talk that much. Because I have to finish packing. I leave tonight for Las Vegas and starting to tour the Southwest in a little preparation for the workshop that starts on Saturday night, or technically Sunday. So I need to do that. And also, I notice now in the chat, and I don't know if this applies because we only got a small handful in the chat, but now at the top left corner of the chat window for this video, you can choose live chat or top chat. And top chat seems to suggest that it's not going to show all of the links or all of the postings and the writings that you all are doing, the comments, the chatting. There we go, the chatting. So if you might be missing stuff, turn it to live chat, which will show you everything. It's probably only something somebody needs to worry about who's doing, it's got 1,000 people in chat, but I don't want you to miss anything. Oh, and Barbara's in the group too. Great, thanks for watching, Barbara. And yeah, I think it's going to be a fantastic camera if you really want to travel smaller and lighter. That's great. Caleb's asking what I think about that Black Magic cam. I'll touch on that a little bit in the news section. Let's dive into some critiques. And we have just a couple today. Share my screen here and here. And do you see 3 images there, Steve?
Yeah, I do.
Okay, great. All right, so our first up is Jamie. We've got a raw file. It looks untouched, straight out of the camera. I'm going to guess that this is from Animals of Montana, based on the fact that I see some wolves and Jamie's still alive. So that's why I'm going to guess.
That's nice.
Yep. All right, so I'm gonna talk first. A couple of things. I'm gonna hit the R key. I'm in the develop module already. I'm just gonna crop in just a little bit more.
Looks like the sliders have been moved a little bit, unless is that a preset of yours when you open it
that
up?
might have. I usually try to avoid that. Let's hit reset real quick so we're zeroed. Yeah, okay.
All right. Minor, but
good call. Nope, good call. All right, so just get rid of those trees a little bit and give them a tiny bit of room in front. It's hard. I'm interested to see what you say about that, Steve. And then, of course, just some quick exposure adjustments, contrast. And I or played with Lightroom since the profiles have gotten in here now, but they are supposed to be a lot better. I am finding a much better results starting with a profile and then editing from there. So you can kind of come down.
Where did you find that, Toby? Because I haven't. I have updated my Lightroom. I was using some of the more of the calibration at the top now. But
yep.
If you click the far right side, that's where you get.
Yeah, and you can click this too, and you get whatever group you get to the standard Adobe group, but whatever else you've done. Maybe is it? Yeah. I think this is your favorites right here. That's your favorites get listed there, which you can put in there by clicking the pluses or not. And you can see this as a grid, a list, or the grid. So it's pretty slick. And then Roy's mentioning that it's got a slider. Where do we get to the slider, Roy? I actually haven't played with that. I don't know where to get to the slider for that.
At the bottom, the calibration. Yeah, where you just were actually.
Those are just your colors. And then here, we're in here, and we have this. Roy, tell us where the slider is. We'll come back to that. Okay, so I switched to, what did I switch to? I like the this camera light. And so again, the cameras, it should be the same picture profiles that you have in your camera. So Steve, when you import from a Canon, you will have different options for the camera matching section than I do. This is imported from a Sony camera, Jamie's Sony. So it's got different options than you would for a Canon or for a Nikon. And these are supposed to be tweaked in such a way that they really are best for your camera and give you the best results. That doesn't mean that you won't find good results jumping into the Adobe Color or Portrait or Standard, because those two have been updated and tweaked. And while they might be more general, they still might, in some cases, give you better results.
That's crazy, because it's got to take into consideration just the thousands and thousands of options of Canon glass that I could have been taking that shot through, where it's probably got 2 or 3 options for your Sony.
Yes. All right.
Sorry, just a little dig on you. It's been a while.
It's okay. I can take it. Okay. Especially since I got this. We'll talk about this Hasselblad and its issues in a minute too. All right. So I've brightened this image by almost a full stop. That's not to say I think the way you shot it was good. You preserved the detail in the snow. You want to be really careful in shooting snows. I often do shoot a little underexposed. The snow will look a little flat, a little gray, a little boring. But then you can brighten that and get that to come out. A little more contrast. Might see what I think the highlights up a little more, the shadows up just a tiny bit more to really look at how those wolves start to come alive. Yeah. And now there's another new change. I didn't mention this last week because I hadn't realized it yet. But you know, we counsel if you hold down Shift, double click whites, it will automatically set it at the white point. Same thing for blacks. I don't always love where it moves that to, and in both cases I feel like it's gone a little too far. But it will now do that for all of the settings. So if you double click the highlights, it will move them to where it would have if you hit auto. So it's kind of a pick and choose which ones you want to go to auto. It will do that for exposure all the way through blacks. It didn't used to do that, right? I don't know. I only use it on the whites and blacks, so I'm pretty sure I tried at some point in the near distant future. Yeah, and it would not do that. So okay, but so in the highlights, I feel like it's come down a little too much. But there we go. Let's look at our before and our after. And then I just add a little bit of clarity and a tiny bit of vibrance. And that's the other change. Dehaze has moved up into this section. And I would also, I wanted to get a video out this week for you all, but it's going to probably be a little delayed, about my love affair for the radial mask, because I just use it so frequently. I probably throw a radial mask over these guys and increase just a little bit more clarity so they're popping. Yeah, that's what I would do. What do you think, Steve?
Well, out of curiosity, I just want to see something, and this is totally experimental. It may be a really bad idea, but can you do a crop where maybe just try freeform for now, just unlock the crop, and on the right side, bring it in so you're actually you're cutting out the black wolf. So bring it in just to where his nose is, right there. And then, you know, just kind of come down. So what I'm doing is coming really tight on the faces of the wolves in that kind of and maybe even it up, maybe even bring that left side in a little bit. Yeah, I hear you. I feel you. And just wanted to kind of see this look here, because visually I'm getting really distracted by the black wolf being back there, and the part of it is, and I know why it's there, like he's not in line and he's a different color, and and I get all of that, and actually the snow kicking off of the wolves with the black fur in the background looks really cool. You can really see the snow in the air, so I understand why it's there, but that big tail in front of him is distracting, and it just doesn't seem to fit. And I get it, like that's why he's there, because he doesn't fit. But I don't know. I think the problem I'm having with this photograph is it's very two-dimensional, but it's a very three-dimensional sort of scene. And I think that's just because you're shooting horizontally, shooting sideways. It would be awesome if you're positioned where they're kind of running like at a diagonal towards you a little bit, and you got a little bit more depth between each of them. Anyway, I don't know if I'm crazy about that crop. The timing of it is good with the symmetry of the heads, and everything looks to be in focus. It's hard for me to tell on my end, but it looks to be nice and clear. And yeah, I think that's better rather than cropping.
I think you could go either way, and I've got it up so it's showing me the image dimensions here. I think that that's a cool image as well. It's just head leading on up.
I almost want to see like that tail that's blocking the black wolf disappear, or as if it's being tucked down or something, and then the tail of the bottom wolf have it angled down more so that you see the back legs of the black wolf. He's just it's kind of like cutting his feet off, and you see this one leg starting to come down. I don't know, it just on one hand I totally get it, on the other hand visually it's just a little stressful to the eye to try and figure out exactly what the story is.
I don't know. I think you're onto something with this crop in here. I think there is a lot to love when it's just 4 basically identical wolves in various states of galloping forward. I think that there's a lot. Now you definitely are losing some detail when you get in that close. And
that was my other fear, is you're really getting in tight. And actually, we talked about this on the last competition review. It's much more pleasing to the eye. I can't explain why this is, but odd numbers tend to be more pleasing to the eye. So if you got to the 3 front runners in a crop, that would actually probably, in my opinion, look better on a tight crop than all 4 of them. We were talking about that. I can't remember the shot, and I remember when I was remodeling my apartment in Santa Barbara, we were doing all the lighting, and I really played a big role in that. And the electrician said, always do 3 if you can. We were hanging lights above a kitchen bar, and it just looks much more custom. It's much more pleasing to the eye than the even numbers. And again, I can't explain exactly why that is, but it does make a difference in photography. It is something to think about.
Yeah, interesting. Cool. All right. But I think you got a good start to work with. Just a couple other things to be mindful of when you're shooting an image like this. You went to a very high shutter speed. You wanted to freeze everything, but you didn't have to go quite that high. And I think this image would do a little bit better if you had just a little bit more depth of field. Maybe an f6.3, an f8 would have given you a little bit more. And also you could have probably dropped your ISO just a tiny bit, but 500 really doesn't impact images too much. But overall, a pretty cool image. And I think you've got 2 different images in here, as Steve was saying. All right. Oh, Jamie's got another one. What's the first thing that grabs your eye in this shot, Steve?
Just popped up on my screen. I think it froze for a second there.
Okay.
The red?
Yeah. That red. And so again, let's see, this is 200. So I think you were probably out at your maximum with the lens, probably using your 18 to 200 lens. And so you were out at as far as you could be. But I think what we need to do now is kind of crop in and maybe free form, because that red just grabs the eye, and we could maybe leave part of that. I don't know. I want a little bit of story is what I'm trying to look for in this crop, but without too much of the distraction.
Make it a black and white. I'm curious to see if we take that red out of there. I know it takes the color away from the bird, but and then obviously we process it a little differently as a black and white. But.
Yeah, I often brighten a little bit. I add a lot more contrast usually. The problem with that, it definitely takes care of the red, but that purple on that hummingbird is really pretty. Another option.
Okay, so just go to individual color and just tone those reds and bring the saturation way down on the red and see what that does. you know, make that purple be the color that grabs your eye. And even you can even bring the greens up. Look at on his feathers. There's some beautiful green tucked in there. Of course, that's going to bring the background up too, isn't it?
A little bit, yep. But
we
could
have
also
to paint it on.
That's right. We could do that as well. So I just want to, let's see, I want to come down just a little bit. And so I think this is a good one for illustrating what we did here in the colors of how we can adjust individual colors. It's nice. There's no red on the bird, so we can just come into that spot. We could also paint, let's see, blue and green into this section here. Should also kind of fight that red a little bit. It's my flow very low. So, that's a little too funky. But let's try just dropping it a minor. We could also try, ooh, there we go. A little clarity, drop in clarity. And so we've kind of evened out the bird feeder, and it's still right there. But the bird certainly shows up a little better. I'd say when we're cropped in that much, though, we're starting to lose a little bit of detail. So now that we've kind
of... One of the things, Toby, that I want to point out with this picture, though, if you just go back to the original frame without the crop, is when you're taking a shot like this and you're positioning it in camera and you're thinking about your composition. And I understand that, you know, with birds and wildlife and stuff like that, it's moving quickly, and there is an element of luck in here, and you just grab the shot. But just some things to think about, like where that bird feeder, the right edge of the bird feeder actually intersects with the pole that's holding up the bird feeder. I want to see separation there. It can overlap, you know, quite far if you want to do that. But what's even better is separating that. So just moving to the right, you know, 6 or 7 steps would probably divide those two. I mean, you can create that in Photoshop, of course, but
yeah,
that's just something to think about. You know, always be really careful of that. And also with the edge of your frame, you know, careful about where things end, and do they end like right on the edge? If so, create a little extra space so that because it's tough on the eye when something just intersects just like that, and they're not the same.
Yeah, that's a great point. And one of the things that I think you can do is try to get that safety shot, a shot like this, and then start to work it. Look for those intersections that Steve just mentioned. Look for how you can frame the bird in a better background, or with less of the bird feeder, maybe a few steps to the right, and shoot more straight on, and just kind of graze a corner of that bird feeder more than getting all of it, kind of we're perpendicular to it. So I think those are great tips.
Yeah, there's almost, and also I'm looking at the hook at the top, right? You can't see what's holding that hook. And so you almost need to go wider so that you see the entire structure of the bird feeder, and then the bird is part of that story. Or you decide to just go in really tight and just make the story about the bird, sitting on his support.
Yeah. Yeah, sounds good. All right, and our last image to take a look at is Brendan's Ballybunion Beach waves.
Nice.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I love this. I love how three-dimensional this is. It's taken from a little far away. Part of me wants to see more foreground so I can really feel like I'm standing there on the beach. However, the way it's cropped and the way it's kind of structured, where the cloud line stops and you've got some empty space up there, maybe I'd come down just slightly on the top because and make it more symmetrical with the amount of beach that you see in that lower left corner, but just very little. The way this is done is nice. The leading lines all go left to right. And that one little island about halfway up on the left side of the frame that just goes off frame, I would just clip that out of there or crop it out. Just because that is the start of another story that ends abruptly. So just have it not exist. but that's, yeah, this is awesome. It's got a lot of nice depth to it. I'm assuming that he had edited this shot.
No, this seems to be straight out of the camera.
Wow, nice.
Yeah,
it's got some nice contrast and stuff to it. I mean, absolutely nailed the exposure.
I'm just going to hit my landscape. No, I don't like that. I'm just going to hit my slate base. There we go. Slate base, which just pops the, just makes some slight changes to it. I agree completely with the edits you mentioned, Steve. And I think, Brendan, that, nature was kind of helping you. The interesting clouds stop right here. And then there was there's this inch of just kind of flat gray sky above it. And you can just kind of come down to the clouds. And it does balance a little bit better. And I think, Steve, your comment of a little bit more foreground makes this a strong image as well. But just a really nice series of waves that connect us to this rock outcrop that's just got a lot of stuff to love, and just it's kind of rich. And I think another way to say the 3D is there's just a lot of detail throughout the image that our eyes can feast on.
Yeah. Now, and if I'm Brendan and I'm shooting this, I would definitely take this shot the way he did. It's an outstanding shot. And then I don't know what kind of equipment he had in his bag, but I'd turn around and I'd put on a long lens, unless this was already taken with long lens, but do a long lens where you're really focused in on that center area where the waves are crashing on the rock. And I'd get in really tight on that, maybe even a vertical, so that I can include the puffy clouds at the top of the frame, and just get that like dramatic movement at the bottom with these really soft clouds overlooking all of it. That's a nice scene in there too. But this is, as far as a wider overall scene, plays really nicely with the eye.
Nice. Yep, I agree. There's some fantastic. The wind blowing the tops of these waves back over here is another fantastic image as well. Brendan says it was slightly edited, but Brendan, I don't think that's what I got, because this is a raw straight out of the Nikon, and I hit the reset button, and Steve was making his comments looking at the one that hit reset. So I don't think a whole lot. I made some slight changes here. I mean, some of these numbers have been moved a little bit, but not a huge difference from what I warmed it a little bit and added a little bit more contrast. See that kind of originally you have a little bit of that blue seaside haze that's creeping in, and I cut that out. We could a little dehaze happens as well, and then I might just come in and just make this a little bit more green. We could also just kind of come down to the green bit as well and just shift it to the green. Can anybody hear the dog snoring? Maybe a little bit of green saturation. And then I play with this. See, does the grass look better, darker or brighter? You do want to be careful to keep the grass looking natural and not radioactive grass. And then I think really nice.
Toby, if you did a graduated filter up in the sky, adding just a tiny bit of blue, just to, I don't know if it would brighten the scene up just slightly, just very, very little.
Bit more contrast to really kind of make those clouds stand out just a little bit more.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah,
nice. And Brendan did this shot as part of a YouTube video. So Brendan,
and it looks like he did D7200 Tamron 70-2 G2. Oh, great lens. So this is actually then so the option of zooming in real tight, unless you go down there at the shoreline and go get that shot. But he was up on some stairs. A great example of using a longer lens to do landscape photography. And I know we've talked about that quite a bit on some of our videos and our trips and stuff. But one of the things that we did in DC, especially in Amish country, is I was teaching people how to do panoramas with a long lens. So if you pull up to a scene and it's this awesome landscape scene and you find yourself going, oh man, I wish I had my super wide angle or whatever, and I've got my 70-200. This shot by Brendan is outstanding. You can turn your camera vertical and go to the left, take 4 or 5 frames with a tighter lens, and then stitch it together as a panorama. So yeah, thanks for letting us know what you were shooting with. I know we could have found that out on Lightroom here, but
it's nice to know. This is why is it doing that? this shot here is 5 horizontal images stacked on top of each other.
Mm-hmm.
It's at the one above the other, because I was basically lazy and had the 100 to 400 on, and then I was like, well, let's see how it works out. And I loved this composition and this result way more than once I threw the wide angle lens on. So.
Yeah, and people forget that too. Panorama is the way you do them horizontal works, you know, perpendicular or whatever. You just do the same thing to create a vertical panorama.
Yep.
Just have to shoot horizontal.
And yeah, I didn't do, that's right, Talina, that's the top of Whidbey Island, Deception Pass. I didn't do anything other than just shoot it and then say, hey, Lightroom, stack it together. And interesting, you know, Lightroom gives you those 3 projection modes, that one of them completely failed. That's the first time I've seen that with an image that I think it should have been able to handle. The other 2 were totally fine. Or actually, I should say
spherical and cylindrical and all those.
Exactly. Yeah. I can't remember which one it was, but it just was like, can't stitch these together. But then the other one, of course, just made that image you looked at with very little editing by me. All right. So that was a wrap of the critique. Thanks, folks who sent those in. And just a reminder, this is just one of many ways that you can get your images critiqued as being a Pen member. There is the image review that you can post in the Pen community forum. There is, of course, image review number 2, it's called. It's a very fancy name. And that is the monthly video that you do, Steve, along with Ali and Dave, and kind of deep dive discussion. And I don't want to say you guys are harsh on images, because you're similar to how we are right now. You talk about what you love about them, what could make them better, and show what could make them better. But you judge them at the level that images would get judged by professionals. And
yeah, and we're very upfront about that when we kind of rolled this whole thing out. Is that, and it's not to be harsh with anybody, of course. It's just to get, you know, people's images to that next level, as we talk about. And we do it. I mean, I submitted 4 images to competition last year, but before I actually submitted them, I sent them over to Dave and to you and to Ali and to Jachowski. And, you know, I got tons of critical feedback from them, and I had to make a lot of changes, and I had spent days working on these images, and then I had to go back to the drawing board and spend days fixing some other stuff. And it was very frustrating. But at the end of the day, I learned a lot through the entire process, and I really learned a lot from all their feedback. And then watching my images judged, I got to watch people talk about them and the good things that they said about those images, but also the harsh things that they said about those images. And then I even got a review from the PPA on exactly why some images merited and some didn't. And so you've got to have a little bit of thick skin, but I knew that going into it. And I grew so much as a photographer in that, you know, 2-month period of time that I was kind of diving into that. And that's what we're trying to do for people. And I think it's great. And people that aren't involved in actually submitting for the competition, but can watch the videos, I think there's just some pearls that they can really get out of them. And it's just the typical thing, like we all get better together. We want to iron sharpens iron, right?
Mm-hmm. Nice. Good. All right. So take advantage of those. That is fantastic. Thanks, Steve. Okay, I added a quick section called Coming Up, and you could also call it Gear on the Table, whatever. It just gives me a moment to talk about some stuff that's in here. Steve, you and I was showing this off before it arrived. I did a quick live Instagram video earlier today. I've got my hands on a medium format camera. This is the first time that I have had one to go out and shoot with. I've had hands on it before. I've taken pictures with one before, but always at a demo table or something like that. So this is a medium format digital camera. I'm grimacing because it's really hard to get the lenses on and off. And look at the size of that sensor in there. I wanted to hit the light. There we go. It's big. It's a big sensor.
That's what 10 grand gets you right there.
That's what 10 grand gets you.
A big sensor and a yellow button. And no lens and no $4,000 lenses to go with it.
Yeah. And so their lenses are expensive and they have very few of them, but I'll be taking this to, on this Southwest trip, taking some shots with it. 50 megapixel medium format. I have the 90 millimeter and the 45 millimeter lenses with it. And I'm excited to see, you know, the other camera that I'm taking along, of course, is my trusty Sony a7R III, which I've just been really happy. When I look at my pictures from Vietnam, from Tanzania, the pictures that aren't good, they're pictures that I screwed up. You know, I got no complaints. This camera performs really well. Attached to it is the Sigma 24-70 Art f2.8 OS lens. So this is new for me to shoot with. I haven't shot with this lens yet. A lot of people have been asking for a review. I'll tell you, reading other people's reviews, I am generally a big fan of the Art series lenses. I think this one sounds like it's missed the mark a bit, and it doesn't.
Which one was that? Sorry, I missed that.
It's the 24-70 f2.8 with image stabilization.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And based on what I've seen and read, you either spend a little bit more for Canon, which the Canon price now is $16.99 on sale on B&H right now. $16.99 for that 24-70 Mark II. Man, and that's an
awesome lens.
Such a nice lens. Mine's right over there. And Tamron has the $1,200 24-70 f2.8 G2, also with image stabilization. They call theirs VC. It sounds like that's a better purchase. But I'm excited to try this lens out. It's adapted right now with a Sigma adapter, and we'll see how it does. I took a bunch of shots with it last Friday, and I'm happy with them, but I'm not blown away by them.
So I don't know if it was maybe it was the Sigma. Wait, so that Sigma does have image stabilization in it, right?
It does. Yep.
Yeah, we used that lens. Delana used that lens on a brand new D850 camera body on the DC trip. And one of the things that kind of blew me away is her photos were on a tripod. We're at the Washington Monument, and they're not very crisp. And I couldn't for the life of me figure it out. And so I did a 10 times zoom in with her camera and saw that as it was sitting there on her tripod, the Capitol building in the background of the monument was wavering left to right over and over again. And I couldn't understand it. There was no wind. Well, it was the VC was constantly working against the tripod. So just a great reminder to y'all, when you're on a tripod, turn that VC off. It didn't even cross my mind because it's a 24-70 lens.
Yeah.
It's, you know, pretty wide for that. But none of her shots were coming out clear. Once we did that, all of a sudden they were crisp clear. It's a great lens, but man, there was a lot of movement by that stabilization on a tripod. Yeah,
it's really, I've seen that too lately. Myself, in both switching back and forth from video, where sometimes I do want it on, and stills. And Sigma is some lenses doesn't seem to care. It either understands it's on a tripod or it doesn't fight it. But every Sigma lens with image stabilization that I've ever put on a tripod, if I forget to turn it off, it kills my images. They're soft.
Yeah. It was substantial.
Yeah. All right. Couple of quick news stories, because supposedly we have 10 minutes left of this show. First up, silly. This adapter lets you mount any giant lens on your tiny smartphone. So it is a Chinese company called Cinematic International Company Limited. It's like it's like, let's throw business words at our title. Cinematic International Company Limited. Okay. This just seems silly. This seems very silly, but maybe I should watch the video before I really make more fun of it, and we're not going to have time to do that. But I don't know. Seems silly.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Well, you know, somebody's probably making a bunch of money off of it.
Maybe. Okay, so Caleb asked about this, and honestly, I haven't spent a whole lot of time looking at. God, this ad scared me once already. I haven't spent a whole lot of time looking at it, but this is an update to their Pocket Cinema camera. Now, the older one was more of a stick it in a studio on a tripod, hook your HDMI cable and your audio cables into it, and it wasn't really a camera that you would go out shooting with. Although I'm not going to call it pretty, this is certainly a much looks like form and function a camera that you could walk out the door with and start shooting. And this seems like a real strong competitor to the GH5. The GH5 is fantastic for shooting beautiful 4K in a small portable form factor with tons of professional features. You need to plug in all kinds of serious audio. You got that. You need to do serious HDMI out. You got that, all that stuff. And this really, where's the picture of the side? Here we go. We got full-wide HDMI out. We've got full XLR audio in, which is fantastic. And of course, headphone jack. And this is, did I say, this is supposed to be $1,200, whereas the wow. Blackmagic plans to ship this later this year for $1,300. Sorry, so I was off 100. And it will do 4K at 60, which is lovely. So this is pretty exciting. I think it's great for Panasonic to have some competition in this market. Blackmagic typically does kind of higher end camera stuff, that cinema type cameras. Oh, and the other big thing, if I'm reading all this correctly, it will support ProRes RAW. Other notable updates include support for 10-bit ProRes and 12-bit RAW recording. Now, that means that the video coming out of this is going to be so much more editable and gradable than you would typically get with a video out of most video cameras. Most of the time, when you're shooting video, you are getting basically 30 frames of JPEGs a second. And so your editing capabilities of that is fairly limited. And this seems pretty nice. And it's not something the GH5 does. GH5 has a very high bit rate, which helps with editing, but it doesn't give you the ProRes RAW.
Do you get an articulating screen at all with that?
I don't. The screen seems to be sticking out here a little bit, but I don't.
It looked fixed in the pictures, but yeah, I was just curious.
Yeah, I'm not sure. It's a good question. Yeah. I didn't see anything mentioned about it, so I don't know.
Can I touch on one of these news stories? Just
you bet.
A moment of silence for the fact that Fujifilm is going to discontinue Acros 100 black and white film in October. That is, honestly, that's terrible news. That's one of my all-time favorite black and white films. I love shooting Fujifilm Acros.
I'm sad. You have more film experience than I. Tell me what other black and white films would somebody go to, or would you suggest in place?
Well, there was a lot of the Kodak stuff, the T-Max, and that's like your typical fairly, I mean, it's, pro film, affordable pro film. But the Fujifilm was just so smooth and contrasty, and I love the look of Acros black and white. Anytime I was going out shooting black and whites, I'd just put that in there. I think I had a couple rolls of Kodak, shot those, and they were good. That's all I shot back in high school. But as soon as I started shooting Acros, I just liked it so much more. So clean, so smooth, no noise, no grains on that 100. But such is the case. So moment of silence for that.
It's interesting to see some best figures. There definitely seems to be a resurgence in people's interest in shooting film, but is that completely and totally offset by those people who still used to shoot film, not stopping? Is there an up in demand for film at all, or is it completely on the downward trend 100%?
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly on the downward trend. There's I mean, when I was working the film counter at Sammy's, we had some diehard film shooters and stuff, and we had a lot of younger folks getting into it. But it was more that, like, it was folks that kind of wanted to know where digital came from and go down to those roots and play around with film and learn. And I love that, I totally appreciate that. Or it was kind of more of that hipster sort of crowd and stuff. And I'm looking at Caleb's comments, and I was hoping he'd get in here and comment, because he actually has a better grasp of film than I do. And Roger said he used to shoot a lot of Ilford FP4 back in the day. And we used to always say when I was working the film counter that basically it went from 31 flavors down to chocolate, vanilla, and strawberry, and in our film refrigerators on what you could buy. So it's been dwindling away. I think there'll always be somebody shooting film. There'll be somebody selling it. It'll just get really expensive. It'll be like the real wealthy trust fund hipsters will be shooting film. Sounds terrible to say, but it's kind of just going down that path. But acros, yeah, I love that stuff.
Okay. Caleb claims that the Fuji their film is going back up. It's not down. I want some facts and figures, Caleb. And also Kodak just brought back T-Max 3200 and maybe Ektachrome.
Ektachrome, that's awesome. I did see actually that the T-Max 3200 came back. Not a huge fan of that, but I mean, if you want that super grainy look and certain wedding photographers, I think, used to shoot a lot of T-Max 3200 for indoor scenes and stuff like that. But Ektachrome is awesome. That's going to be expensive stuff. We'll see. Yeah, I don't know. I keep hearing reports. I really enjoyed my time working with film at Sammy's. I still like to shoot. I haven't been shooting it much this year at all. For me, I just like to slow down, and I like the mystery of film, and I like the look of it.
It'll be interesting to have you take a look at the results from the Hasselblad and feel if that medium format sensor gives you a little bit more of a film look. We'll see.
Yeah. And we were joking about the fact that it's 10 grand, and that is a truckload of money, no question about it. But in the medium format world, that is very affordable for a 50 megapixel medium format camera. I mean, you get a phase 1 50 megapixel camera, that's going to run you about 30 grand. You get up to 100 megapixels, it's $50,000-$60,000 just for the body. So, kudos to Hasselblad. I don't think that's the one that people are really flocking to as a carry around medium format. Fuji probably is doing a really good job with that. So but what I like to see is that the trend is going there. We're getting to these like mirrorless medium format cameras that are becoming more affordable. That are not totally affordable yet, but they're getting there. And then, I'm keeping a very close eye on that kind of thing. That's the type of shooting that I would dream of doing one day. I just can't afford to do it.
Nice. Okay, good. All right, moving on real quick. Updates on Shutterstock. One, I took that I think it's fantastic, that owl picture last Friday and quickly submitted it to Adobe and Shutterstock. Adobe rejected it. Said there was too much noise in that image. So let's just want to share that with you.
Too much noise?
Too much noise.
Do you remember your settings?
Off the top of my head, I think that's shots at ISO 800 or 1000. And it's
crop it way in or something?
It's been cropped in some, and it's been heavily edited to remove noise. I did a lot of lens blurring in Photoshop of the background to soften it. And so they might have zoomed in. If you go past 100%, I have a little bit of not so careful editing around the owl that maybe they caught their eye. But you gotta go past 100% to see that.
Wow.
So I just think it's interesting.
It was a great shot.
I was pretty happy with it. I was pretty happy to see him, and then to be able to capture that. I took about 200 shots of him, and really that's the only one that's good. I could it was raining too hard at times, so it just softened the distance and softened the owl enough, or it was earlier in the morning for the first 100 or so shots. My ISO is up 3200, 6400, and they're slightly underexposed, and they're a little rough. So, but I was very happy that I got one good, and that's all it takes. It makes me happy. Shutterstock did take that, and although I haven't sold that yet, I have continued to sell that owl very well that I posted a year and a half ago, and somebody bought it with a more exclusive rights or something like, I can't remember what it is, but that was a $20 purchase right there. So for the month, I think now I'll talk about the month, because since they're sending me regular payouts, I'm at $27 for the month. Oh, that's not bad. And I think they just sent me a $50 check. That was November to beginning of April. And Roy, let's all congratulate Roy. He had a $17 single sale, which bumped him up to $50.84, and that's enough to get a paycheck. So that's their cash out limit. And Roy, I think you've been doing it for about a year now, I think.
1 year.
1 year.
$50 in a year.
$50.
Awesome.
So again, obviously, as this experiment kind of I thought would tell is that you're not going to make a living occasionally selling stock photos. But it seems to be, you know, if you get lucky with a couple of shots that seem to do well, a nice way to earn a little extra dollars that maybe you can take your lovely wife or partner out to dinner from time to time. Cheap.
Well, the nice thing is at $50 now, you can get a big tub of popcorn, a Coke, and maybe a hot dog to go with that IMAX movie seat. Where before you were really going to starve through the film. So,
well said. Well said. Yeah. Okay. And now let's do photos from space. We've got an aurora shot from the International Space Station. I feel like this is similar to what we shared last week. There it is. Sunrise is just starting to come up on the far side, but or right here off to the left, I guess, is our sunrise. But that aurora, seeing that aurora and seeing those distinct individual bands from space is pretty cool. I've got a bonus one here. I've got an image to share with you all. I got this in my email box today, a rare video of Steve. I'm like, what? No, we got Steve on every week.
For the viewers out there, and also for my own, you got to remind me here because I looked into this about a year ago because it's got such a cool name. But remind everybody, what is Aurora Steve?
So Aurora Steve is this, it's these more vertical, I think, lines that happen straight up from the surface, or they look like they're going straight up from the surface as we're seeing here. And it just says here that this apparition, which occurred during a G1 class magnetic storm, was so long lasting that at least one onlooker had time to capture the rare video of the phenomenon. This is a still frame of the phenomenon up there in BC, Canada.
Yeah. That's pretty amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. And then we want to finish up with a good question from Ben Mooney. He wants to build a business for his website. He's got his drone license, his FAA 107, and he wants to start letting people know what's the best place to build a website these days. I think Squarespace and Wix are both some of the easiest, most professional looking. Now, Squarespace does, they haven't actually paid me a paycheck in quite a while, but you can still save 10%, I think, at squarespace.com/PhotorectTV or PhotorectToby. Try one of those, and you can save 10%. Steve, you've built your website on Wix. You did that a while ago, and they've also been sponsors of this channel at times. I think it's a toss-up. They're both very good. Last time I used Wix, I felt like they might have had slightly easier tools to make it look a little bit more like your own. Whereas the Squarespace tools, I think it looks really nice, but it's probably going to look like some other people's as well.
Yeah, I used both products, but we're also going back to like 2015 now, 2016. I had built a site with Squarespace, and after about 6 months to a year, it wasn't very long, I had kept it up to date, and I was making a lot of edits, and it crashed on me frequently, very frequently. I understand that that's been fixed, and I mean, we're talking, you know, a couple years ahead now, which is
yeah, I haven't experienced
a lot of time in technology, so I'm sure there's been huge improvements. And so I decided to try a trial version of Wix, and it just worked flawlessly. The trial version worked flawlessly. It loaded up really quick. It rendered the photos really fast, and it was simple. Both of them are very, very simple. I just found Wix to be more stable. But again, the last time I touched that site, I think if you go onto my website and you look at any of the pictures under the travel and instruction, I think the last pictures were Scotland, I want to say. So I haven't touched it in a long time, and I'm so embarrassed to admit that, but you guys get the raw version of me, so I'll admit it to you. I'm in the process. I'd like to kind of keep a close eye on what Ben is doing, because I'm in the process of redoing my website sometime when I'm actually going to be home for an extended period of time. I like to sit down and do that and get some updated stuff up there and take off a lot of old stuff. My editing process has changed quite a bit. So, but I think Squarespace or Wix, I don't know that you can really go wrong with either of those. I did have one of my older websites was custom built, and it was, what's the really common custom build? The name's escaping me. WordPress. Yeah, thank you. With a bunch of plugins and stuff. And it was such a pain for me. Unless you're on it every day, for me to go back in even a week, once a week, I'd have to relearn how to do stuff. And there's a certain language that you have to learn and use. And with Wix and Squarespace, it's just drag and drop. It was so much easier.
I'll say this, as a WordPress user, I completely agree. And there's parts of Photorec.tv that are broken right now, and I can't quite figure them out. And it's frustrating. And also, these days, if you don't employ serious security measures on the back end, you will be hacked. It's just a matter of time before they start putting like Russian pharmacy crap on there. With all that said, though, there is now an offering of WordPress's will host. And it's a lot more similar to kind of Wix and Squarespace. I haven't looked into it in great depth, but it does give you probably more customizability, a little bit more work on your end. But those bad things I say shouldn't happen because WordPress is taking care of a lot of that update and maintenance. So that's another look. You could look at WordPress's own hosting. But as far as
I might look into that. Actually, I've been using Bluehost for years.
Yeah, we should talk about it on this trip while we're together. We should look at all three and maybe do a little discussion about them. The state of building your own website. Yeah. So those are the three options I would look at, Ben, and probably Squarespace if you want to save a little, Wix if you really want to make sure yours looks a little bit more unique. And WordPress, I think, is probably the cheapest option of them, but will require a little bit more work on your part.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. We're going to wrap this up so that I can put on pants. Oh, no, I'm wearing pants.
Again.
You don't even know. And so I could get finished packing. And, I hate packing right up to when I walk out the door because there's always if I give myself like an hour or two to have everything packed, to scan my list, to scan the room, there's always something I'm like, oh, I should bring that, or I should bring that or that. So I hate that feeling of like literally zipping as you're walking towards the door with all of your stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Plus I got to go to the post office and yeah. So, okay. Hey, Steve, thanks so much for joining us today. We're always, it's just so much better. Last week, everybody in the chat was like, oh my God, when is Steve coming back?
Yeah, I doubt that. I seriously doubt that.
Wasn't good.
Did you at least have a show longer than 24 minutes?
Put Archer on. At least put Archer on.
Well, hey, have a good time scouting out those spots. For those who don't know, Toby's going out a little early to just make sure that everything on the tour runs smoothly. We have 3 of these Southwest tours that we're doing this year, and we're getting ready to kick our first one off. And I'm really excited about it. Our clients are super excited. This has been coming for a long time. We're shooting some iconic spots. So thanks for doing that pre-work, Toby. That always makes a huge difference. I'm bummed not to be out there with you. Doing scouting is always a lot of fun because we get to selfishly get to just be photographers and take pictures and not have the obligation of teaching hanging over our heads. But I will see you on Saturday night.
Sounds good. All right. You safe travels to you, Steve. Everybody, chat room. Thanks so much. Everybody who's watching this after. Thanks. We appreciate it. And make sure you're chatting in the community, the Facebook group and in pen.community. because the community is growing. I love to see new names, but I love to see the old names posting, sharing their thoughts, sharing their comments. It's just great. So thanks, everybody. And no show next week. We'll see you the following week. Bye-bye.
Bye, y'all.